Today, we are going to discuss about brain. Okay, but to be exact, it will be neuromotor basis lah. The thing that, the parts that, or the component that involve in controlling, okay, in controlling motor behavior. So it will consist of the brain, of the neuron, and also some part of spinal cord, and finally motor unit. Itu apa yang kita akan belajar hari ni lah. So let's go one by one. Okay, boleh nampak nota ni? Neuromotor system. Right. So the first one is about neuromotor system, which consists of CNS and PNS. Okay, central nervous system dengan peripheral nervous system involved in control of any coordinated movement, whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary. So they are part of the brain that control the voluntary, and they are part which is controlling the involuntary movement. Okay, and we are going to focus on CNS, which consists of your brain, the brainstem, uh, the spinal cord, the neuron, and the motor unit. Itu untuk CNS. Okay, alright. So we start the first one. This is neuron. Kita tengok ada tak gambar ni ke? Enggak ada. Enggak ada. Okay. So this is neuron. Ataupun apa nama Melayu neuron ya? Can anybody give a Malay name for neuron? Apa ni nama neuron? Bahasa Melayu. Bahasa Melayu neuron. Come on guys. Apa?
Saraf.
Urat saraf. Okay.
Saraf.
Alright. Mana yang lawa? Cari nak lawa.
Saraf tunjang.
Woi, bukan. Saraf tunjang tu spinal cord. Come on. Orang kata kalau nak mengencing biar berpada-pada. It's still saraf, but that is spinal cord lah, tu benda lain. Kita tengok yang ni lah. Alamak. Ada yang ada nama. Okay, take yang ada nama. Alright. So for neuron, this is the orang kata the general, okay, the general structure of neuron. So for each neuron, we are going to have, the first one is the nucleus. Semua neuron akan ada nucleus. Cuma this nucleus, the placement of the nucleus sometimes is not like this. Okay, sometimes it's not going to be placed at the dendrite. Ni kita panggil dia nucleus ni, dia selalunya duduk dekat tempat nama dia cell body. Okay, this is known as cell body ni. Right, so in the cell body, it will place a nucleus. So some sort of some type of neuron, cell body dia bukan kat sini, bukan kat hujung. Cell body dia dekat tengah, especially a sensory receptor neuron ataupun sensory neuron. Kalau yang kat hujung macam ni, this will be the motor neuron. Okay, motor neuron ataupun efferent neuron. Dia rupa macam ni. Kalau efferent neuron, dia tak, kita ambil gambar terus efferent. Sekejap ataupun sensory neuron. Can we have this some sort of like this. If we take sensory neuron or efferent neuron, their cell body most of the time is going to be located in the middle. Tak semestinya dekat tengah-tengah lah, kadang-kadang ke depan sikit, kadang-kadang dekat belakang sikit, but it will be placed in the middle. Ni kalau sensory neuron. Kalau motor neuron is just like what we have seen. Macam ni. Ni motor neuron, where the cell body is at the end. Okay. So along the cell body we have dendrite. Ni kaki-kaki ni. Okay. So saya nak kamu bezakan dua. We have dendrite at one side. We have axon terminal at another side. So if synapse occurs, it will occur in between axon terminal towards another neuron dendrite. Maksudnya dekat sini ni is axon terminal neuron lain. Dia macam tu, okay. So axon terminal will make synapse with dendrite. So this is the place of synapse, the place where the electrochemical impulse being channeled from one neuron to another neuron. Today, okay, dendrites and axon. And in the middle, yang panjang ni, this what known as an axon. So the length of axon is being determined by the placement of the neuron. If it is a motor neuron, usually it's going to be long. Same goes as sensory neuron. Kalau interneuron, dia pendek-pendek je axon. Okay, and this axon being surrounded by myelin sheath. So dia akan jadi penebat lah. Okay, they are going to withhold the impulse within the axon itself, and the presence of node of Ranvier ni further accelerate the impulse. Ni adalah anatomy general, okay, general anatomy for neuron. To be specific, this is efferent neuron. Okay, efferent neuron ataupun motor neuron. Kalau efferent neuron or sensory neuron macam yang kita tengok tadi. Okay, dia lebih kepada the shape is something like this. Kita tengok yang ni. Okay, tu kita dah nampak dah. Okay, sensory neuron or afferent neuron, the cell body is in the middle. And then kita ada central axon, peripheral axon. Okay, we have central axon, peripheral axon. For motor neuron or efferent neuron, kita tak ada central or peripheral. Ni dua ni. Okay, so sensory neuron, axon terminal, and then we have dendrites. Motor neuron pun sama, kita ada dendrite, kita ada axon terminal. The difference is that in motor neuron, cell body is at the dendrites, but for afferent neuron, cell body is not. It is in the line of axon. Okay, so apa beza peripheral ni? Kejap saya tengok. Okay, kita ada peripheral body dengan central body. Peripheral body ni ataupun kita panggil sebagai axon peripheral process. Okay, ni central axon most of the time being located at the CNS. Maksudnya bahagian ini selalunya akan duduk dalam from the spinal cord towards the brain. Yang ini from the spinal cord towards the muscles. Ni beza dia, okay? So this area, central axon, usually is in the CNS. However, for the peripheral, dekat kita punya peripheral means it is from the from the spinal cord out, pergi ke sensory. Okay, central axon daripada spinal cord masuk ke dalam connection dengan interneuron. Dia macam tu. Okay, and then interneuron is the most shortest length of neuron. So it is actually the same. You have axon, you have cell body, you have dendrite, but here for interneuron, the length is shorter compared to sensory neuron. Dia panjang. Dia panjang. Okay, and then motor neuron is the neuron that located inside the CNS, towards muscles. Okay, yang ini dia pergi ke muscles untuk activate motor unit. Yang ini dia pergi ke muscles dalam bentuk sensory. Means this is the place where sensory being captured daripada kita punya mata. Contoh pada mata. Okay, mata, the photoreceptor will send information to sensory neuron. Will send information to ini. Okay, to afferent neuron. And it will be channeled towards the brain. Dia macam tu. And from the brain to let's say to the hand, it will be the work of motor neuron. Dia bukanlah satu yang panjang. Dia maybe they have multiple connection. Okay, satu neuron tu dia akan jadi satu, mungkin dekat in between before it goes to the CNS, dia akan masuk pada 2-3 interneuron. Itu cara dia. Okay, so perjalanan dia, if we talk about perjalanan based on muscles sensor. Let's say kita sentuh benda. Okay, kita sentuh benda, that is your tactile. It will be sent towards your sensory neuron. This sensory neuron will bring the impulse towards your spinal cord. and it will be relayed by interneuron before it goes to brain. And from the brain, it will goes to interneuron, and then it will goes to motor neuron, where the end of the motor neuron, kini end of motor neuron will be attached to motor unit, so that muscular contraction can occur, and then we can have apa ni, reflex. Tu perjalanan dia. Okay, so this is the three type of neuron. So kalau orang tanya neuron, kamu kena faham tu je. Dia ada 3 jenis. Beza 3 jenis is the cell body, the placement of the cell body. Okay, so kalau cell body being placed within the axon, interneuron. If the cell body is in the dendrites, that is efferent ataupun motor. If the cell body is in between the axon, that is afferent or the sensory neuron. Other than that, it will have the same structure. It will have dendrites, it will have axon terminal, it will have axon. Axon ni dia punya panjang ni lah. Kenapa dia buat macam ni? Maksudnya this axon is quite long and it can be elongated on 2 different places. For motor and inter, dia boleh memanjang satu je pasal dia satu arah. Dia satu arah. Okay, ada soalan dekat situ dulu? Any question?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Alright. Ni benda jadilah. Okay, cell body contain nucleus, dendrite, extension from the cell body, range from 1 to 1000 per neuron, receive information from other cell, and the process is known as synapse. Okay, axon, also known as a nerve fiber, extension from the cell body, 1 per neuron, with branches known as collateral. Okay, collateral ni macam ni. Kalau dia kata axon kan, most of the time, axon is going to be only one. Hujung satu dendrite, hujung satu axon terminal. Dia takkan ada cabang. But sometimes, there are cabang-cabangan. Kita cuba tengok dulu mana tahu you punya cabang-cabangan. Can we have cabangan here? No. Cuba tengok tepi ni. Cabang tu kalau ada pun, dia tak besar. Dia macam ni. Okay, axon. And then dia ada cabang keluar. This is known as collateral. Okay, but the main body is always this one. Dia akan ada satu je cabang. Satu cabang. Dia akan ada satu je jalan. Tu kita punya saraf. Okay, being connected with one another. Alright. One per neuron with branches send information from neuron. Okay. Type and function. Okay, yang ni kita dah bincang. Type and function ni kamu kena faham. Kita ada 3 jenis. Sensory, motor, inter. Okay. It will start with sensory. It will start with sensory. Daripada kita punya sensor. It goes to inter. And it goes back down to motor. Okay. And due to that, sensory motor, sensory neuron, the afferent. Okay. Sensory A. Ingat tu. Sensory is A. Afferent. Yeah. Sensory is A. Motor is efferent. Tengok A datang dulu sebelum E. Okay, A datang dulu sebelum E. Alright, sensory neuron ni, since it move from the sensor, from the receptor towards the brain, so movement dia daripada bawah ke atas. And this is known as ascending tract. Okay, this is known as ascending tract. Kejap lagi kita akan sampai itu. And as for the motor, where the impulse move from the CNS to the motor unit, ke bawah, ke luar, that is known as descending tract. Okay, ascending tract, descending tract, ascending tract, descending tract. Kena ingat tu, 2. Jangan lupa. Okay, so we have sensory neuron, also known as afferent, send information to CNS. Jadi dia hantar ke atas. That is afferent. That is sensory neuron. Unipolar. Okay, maksud unipolar ni, the impulse work one way. Naik ke atas je. Dia tak ada tiba-tiba cabang pergi kanan, pergi kiri, tak ada. Dia naik hanya ke atas. Satu jalan saja. That is the meaning of unipolar. So kalau bipolar, most of the time is interneuron. Pasal dia yang menyambung naik dan dia juga yang menyambung turun. Okay, axon is, sensory neuron is unipolar. Okay, the second type of neuron is motor ataupun efferent. Okay, ni efferent, something like this. This one is efferent. Okay, kalau kita tengok sini multipolar lah, apa polar, unipolar, kamu akan nampak satu jalan ni. Okay, satu jalan ni. Bipolar, it can goes both way. Pseudo-unipolar ni, dia sebenarnya sehala. Tapi apa yang beza dia pseudo-unipolar dengan unipolar kat sini? What is the difference between these two? Cuba tengok betul-betul. Apa yang tak ada? Apa yang tak ada antara dua ni?
Dendrite.
Dendrite. Dendrite tak ada. Okay, bila dendrite tak ada, dia tak boleh nak synapse. Okay, dia boleh hantar signal dekat orang. Dia tak boleh receive. That is the meaning of it. Multipolar, dendrite semata. Meaning, this is the place where synapse occurs. Ni multipolar ni dia boleh naik atas, boleh turun bawah. That means it can really channel, it can channels signal multiple ways. Most of the time interneuron lah. Okay, tu maksud unipolar, bipolar. Okay. Motor neuron efferent. Sekejap kita tengok apa kata. Okay. Yang ini, as for motor neuron, they have two types. One is known as alpha, another one is gamma. Okay. Difference is that, for alpha, most of the motor neuron located in the spinal cord. Means that dia dekat dalam spinal cord je. Axon synapse on skeletal muscles. Axon dia keluar. Tapi gamma motor neuron in intrafusal fibers of skeletal muscles. Yang ini duduk dekat dalam muscles. Yang ini channel impulse from the brain to the muscles. Ini duduk dekat muscles. Most of the time dekat motor unit. Kita tengok nanti. Okay, and the third type is interneuron, specialized neuron that originate and terminate in the brain or spinal cord, function as connection. So, dia hanya menyambung. Okay, dia hanya menyambung saja. Dia tak keluar daripada CNS. Afferent and efferent, you can see that the end will be protruding outside of the CNS. Dia akan duduk luar pada spinal cord, but not interneuron. It is located within, tak keluar. Okay, and then we have, after we have neuron, the second main component is, situ dah ada banyak lah tu. Brain. Neuron dulu, okay, boleh. Apa tu? Berfaim. Brain. Aduh, tangan besar sangat, sorry. Brain. Okay. So when we talk about brain, we can divide brain into 4 different parts. Okay, kepada 4. One is known as cerebrum. Ni semua ni. Benda yang katak-katak ni kan. This is known as cerebrum. Cerebrum. B-E-R-U-M. Number 2 is cerebellum. Ni. B-E-L. Okay, cerebrum. Cerebellum. Number 3 is subcortical parts. Okay, dia kat situ. Dia. Okay, subcortical ni, Diencephalon. Subcortical, this is what we call as cortical. This is what we call as cortical, okay, ataupun the surface of the brain. When we talk about subcortical part, it is the parts underneath the surface. Subcortical, under surface. Okay, kita tengok subcortical part. Okay, so this is the brain. And if we dissect the brain, gambar yang agak menarik. If we dissect the brain, inilah. Okay, dalam bahagian otak tu, bawah otak tu. Okay, this is the top part of the brain. Underneath, okay, underneath the cortical part, we have subcortical ni. Kita ada thalamus, hypothalamus, diencephalon. Dia akan duduk dekat sini. Okay. Dia gambar tu. Contoh macam ni. This is the cortical part. Okay, this is the cortical part. Underneath the cortical part or the surface part, we have subcortical. Kita ada apa tu? Cerebral cortex is the cortical. So kita ada basal ganglia. Kita ada brain stem lain. Okay, ni basal ganglia, thalamus, hypothalamus. Ni bahagian kedua. Ataupun nama dia subcortical. The third part is cerebellum tadi. Okay. we have cerebrum, cerebellum, subcortical. And number 4, the last part is this one, brain stem. Okay, brain stem ataupun brain stem bukan saraf tunjang. Saraf tunjang spinal cord bawah ni. Bawah ni kita akan ada saraf tunjang. So, if we talk about brain, ni 4 bahagian. Cortical level, subcortical level kat dalam ni. Okay, cortical level consists of cerebrum and cerebellum. Dah ada 2. Subcortical level ada dekat tengah-tengah ni. And then we have brain stem. We have 3 different part of the brain stems. Namely, medulla oblongata, pons, tu akan duduk sebagai brain stem. Ni dia punya structure asas dia. Okay, sampai situ dulu. Okay, ada 4 bahagian. Ada tak yang kita boleh nampak 4 bahagian kat sini? This one, what we can have. Sama je. Okay, kita ada cortical, subcortical dalam ni. And then we have cerebellum, we have brain stem. That is 4 major component of brain. Ni dia. Okay, cerebellum, cortical, diencephalon, subcortical, cerebellum, cortical, brainstem, saraf. Dia punya apa tu? Bukan saraf tunjang. Brainstem. Tapak dia. Macam mana bagi bahasa Melayu kat brainstem? Can somebody try? Jangan keluar nama mengarut dah. What can we name brain? What can we name the brainstem in Malay? Tapi tu 4 bahagian dia. Okay, sampai sini dulu. Okay, can we proceed? Can we move on?
Boleh, sir.
Boleh, sir.
Boleh.
Okay, so kita tengok bahagian yang pertama, cerebrum. Bahagian cortical level, yang paling besar. Okay, so cerebrum consists of 2 half, right cerebral hemisphere, left cerebral hemisphere, and it is covered by cerebral cortex. So cerebral cortex tu is this one. Ni cerebral cortex. Okay, this is yang berlipat ni lah. Ni nama dia cerebral cortex. So otak kita ni, it consists of 2 different it consists of 2 different parts. Siapa-siapa yang tak boleh tengok benda ni, ada ke? Okay, right hemisphere, left hemisphere. Ya, nak keluar pula. Tu dia. Okay, this is the cerebrum. This is the cerebellum. So we are missing in here is the brainstem. Ni dia brainstem. Tu brainstem. Okay, cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem. Okay, tu bahagian dia. So now let's talk about cerebrum, the first part. When we talk about cerebrum, we can divide cerebrum into 4 different lobe. L-O-B-E. Sekejap. Kita nak define lobe. Benda kita nak bagi nama lobe ni. Okay, dia tak ada cakap apa-apa. Just a part. Okay, just a part. And this lobe being named based on anatomical position sebenarnya. Okay, based on anatomical position. The placement of the lobe determine the name. Okay, the placement of the lobe determine the name. So the lobe we have, in order for us to determine lobe, yeah. Sekejap kita tengok ini. Gray tissue covered by cortex. Okay, it covered by cortex. And when we talk about cortex ni kan, benda berlipat-lipat ni, there are 2 terms you need to have here. The first one is groove. The second one is reach. Okay, reach and groove. Tu adalah 2 bahagian yang kita ada dekat otak. So dekat bahagian otak ni, kalau kita tengok lipatan-lipatan ni, okay, bila kita ada lipatan, in between that we are going to have a slope. Kita akan ada area yang menurun ke bawah. Can we have it here? Sekejap dia macam ni. Ini kita nampak semua. Okay. So we are going to have, all of this is known as the cerebral cortex. Ni apa? Kita ada naik, and then kita ada lekuk. Kita ada naik, kita ada lekuk. Benda yang berlipat-lipat tu. So all that lekuk, this one, lekuk ni, okay, all this lekuk, is known as groove, ataupun the exact name is sulcus. Sulcus. Please write down. Okay. Ni yang lekuk-lekuk ni dekat bahagian cerebral cortex, it is known as sulcus. Ni sulcus. Nampak lekuk je sulcus. Bila ada lekuk, dia akan ada tempat yang timbul. So tempat yang timbul ni, the name is ridges, R-I-D-G-E-S, and the anatomical name is gyrus. Okay, G-Y-R-U-S. Dapat tak? Dapat ke? Enggak dapat ke?
Dapat, sir.
Dapat Telah dilekuk macam ni kan. Ni kalau kita besarkan lah. Benda lekuk, something like that. So yang lekuk ni is groove. Yang naik ni is ridges. So groove, nama scientific dia is sulcus, and ridges is gyrus. Okay. Ni yang ni kita nampak clear lah, 4 bahagian. We have cerebrum, we have cerebellum, we have midbrain. Okay, this is the midbrain, and we have the brainstem. Okay, tu yang asal loop. And then we go to lobes. Okay, to determine lobe here, there are 4 different lobe dekat cerebrum. Okay, in order to determine lobe, first kita kena cari ni central sulcus. Okay, sulcus tadi apa? Lekuk kan? So, kita kena cari lekukan central. Cuba kita tengok satu gambar rajah. Kita tengok gambar rajah macam ni lah. When you see something like this, kita boleh nampak there will be one not quite large, but quite distinct. Okay, quite distinct sulcus which divide the brain into forebrain and hindbrain, anterior and posterior. Tu tengah-tengah dia. Okay, by having that tengah-tengah, the brain part that fall front of central sulcus is frontal lobe. The brain that falls behind the central sulcus is parietal lobe. Okay, and then the brain part that falls above the cerebellum is occipital lobe, and dekat bahagian tepi ni is temporal lobe. Ni dekat tepi bahagian otak tepi kan, bahagian kepala kita ni, kalau kita tengok sebelah kiri dan kanan yang dilekuk tu, that is what we call our temporal. Okay, the skull area is known as temporal. So the brain part that falls there is known as temporal lobe. Tu cara untuk kita tentukan. So we need to determine the first and foremost, we actually need to determine the presence of central sulcus. Contoh macam ni lah, kalau kita ambil otak ni tadi kan, central sulcus. Mana satu central sulcus? Dia akan bagi tengah-tengah. So this one, the sulcus is quite clear. Okay, so anything that falls front of central sulcus is frontal lobe. Anything from central sulcus to the last segment, ni last segment ni. Okay, this last segment that falls above the cerebellum is occipital. So in between occipital and frontal, this one is parietal. Okay, and bahagian tepi ni is temporal lobe. 4 bahagian. And this lobe being named based on the placement of the lobe itself. Tu adalah 4 lobe. Okay, sampai situ dulu. Ini gambar yang mudah untuk kamu tengok. Ni dia. Okay, so we have frontal lobe, we have parietal lobe, we have occipital lobe, and we have temporal lobe. First, in order to determine which lobe, you need to find out central sulcus ataupun lekukan tengah yang bagi 2 otak. Dia boleh tak kita tengok gambar 2 gambar otak betul lah ni. Okay, this is left hemisphere, this is right hemisphere, and in between this, it being put together by apakah nama benda yang menyambungkan mereka berdua? Corpus Callosum. Dia nipis je Corpus Callosum ni sebenarnya. So Corpus Callosum is the one that attach left and right hemisphere together. Okay. So mana central loop kat sini? Which is a central loop? Which is central sulcus? Masa tu? Is it here? Or is it here? Yang mana yang obvious? 1, 2, 3, 4. Which one is obvious?
Number 1 kot sir.
Number 1 and number 2.
Yes.
Dia setiap satu ni akan ada central sulcus lah, pasal dia tak bercantum tau dua-dua ni. Dia dicantumkan, means kalau kita buka dia, we still going to have left hemisphere and right hemisphere. And then only dekat bahagian midbrain dia bercantum. Because of the corpus callosum dekat atas dia. So this is central sulcus. Okay. So anything above central sulcus is frontal. Okay. Ini adalah bahagian cerebellum. So this part is occipital. And between frontal and occipital, in between this is parietal. And dekat bahagian tepi is known as temporal loop. Itu adalah 4 loop ataupun bahagian yang ada dekat otak. Okay, zombie suka makan otak. Okay, sampai sini dulu. Any question?
No, sir.
No sir. Okay.
Okay, so lobe kita bergerak ke lobe lain. Okay, 4 lobe. And then lobe ni bahagian. Okay, at the same lobe we have sensory cortex. So sensory cortex ni sebenarnya terletak dekat bahagian-bahagian ini. But when we talk about sensory cortex, we have specialized it towards sensory. Dekat bahagian mana sensory kita bergerak. Okay. So sensory cortex posterior to central sulcus receive neuron axon. Okay. Untuk cerita sensory cortex, you need to have. Okay, this is several place of sensory cortex. Okay, kita ada primary motor cortex, kita ada supplementary motor cortex. Okay, kita ada primary, kita ada supplementary. Lepas tu kita ada premotor cortex. Ni untuk motor. Okay, tengok dulu. Location for the first one, primary motor cortex, frontal lobe just anterior to central sulcus. Means that for primary motor cortex, dia akan duduk dekat sini. Okay, frontal lobe anterior of central sulcus. So dekat bahagian atas ni. Okay, dekat bahagian frontal lobe ni, kita ada 3 bahagian cortex. Primary motor cortex, supplementary motor cortex, premotor cortex. 3. Okay. Primary motor cortex, PMC. Supplementary motor cortex. And then kita ada premotor cortex. Pre dengan primary dah sama dah. But these 3 things is actually doing the same task. Okay, dia macam mana kita cakap, dia melengkapkan satu sama lain. One pull out the information, another one organize, another one control. Dia macam tu. Kita tengok nanti. Okay, so we have primary motor cortex, frontal lobe, contain motor neuron that send axon to skeletal muscle. Okay, motor neuron efferent ke efferent? Motor neuron efferent ke efferent? Efferent. Jadi dia punya cell body dekat mana? Dekat dalam dendrites. And most of motor neuron kan ada 2 jenis. Kita ada alpha, kita ada gamma. Okay. Primary motor cortex, it said that it contains motor neuron that send axon to skeletal muscle. Motor neuron yang duduk dekat dalam primary motor cortex, alpha ke gamma? Alpha ke gamma ke? Alpha ke gamma? Yang mana satu duduk dalam? Apa dia? Alpha code. Janganlah alpha code. Betul lah tu alpha.
Oh, betul.
Alpha is the one that being placed in the CNS. Gamma duduk dalam musculator. So alpha motor neuron is the neuron that send impulse from primary motor cortex towards the skeletal muscle. Itu kerja dia. Ni yang pertama, primary motor cortex. So the placement of primary motor cortex is in the frontal of the sulcus. Is at the anterior of the sulcus ni. Bahagian atas ni. This is where primary motor cortex happen to be. So if the primary motor cortex happen to be here, this is the place where voluntary muscular contraction being controlled. Primary motor cortex, tempat voluntary movement. Okay. Next one, kita ada apa? Okay, ni dia punya function. Initiation and coordination of movement, postural coordination. Okay, and then we have premotor. Tadi primary motor. Now, premotor. So, kalau kita tengok sini kan, primary is the main one. Premotor means before primary. So, the control between premotor dengan primary motor, premotor going to get lesser control. Dia yang akan initiate dulu. Okay. Anterior to the primary motor cortex. The primary motor cortex is anterior at the frontal lobe, anterior to the sulcus. Sini. So, the premotor area is anterior to the primary. Maksudnya depan primary. Ni kat bahagian sini. This is the area of, saya confirmkan. This is the area of premotor cortex. Okay. Primary motor cortex, premotor cortex. Anterior towards the primary. Okay. So, the function of the premotor, organization of movement before they are initiated. Primary motor, initiation. Okay, initiation and coordination. Premotor, organize the movement before they are initiated. Meanings here is that when we have a movement that we try to conduct, it will be organized first by premotor before being initiate ataupun before the impulse being sent down. They send down impulse daripada primary motor. Okay, so the organization being made at premotor and the impulse will be sending out by primary motor. Perjalanan dia. Okay, meaning it goes from here to the primary motor and from the primary motor send it out. To function dia, okay? So, enable transition between sequential movement of a serial control of movement based on observation of another person performing a skill. Meaning that, dia yang control, dia yang shape dulu. Okay, kita kena buat perubahan. That is the work of premotor. We need to make some adjustment because our movement is not going to be significant. Ada movement yang lagi baik. And when that happen, it has been organized, it will be sent to primary motor and activation will be presence. Activation akan terjadi. So, the impulse will be sent downwards towards the musculature. Itu perjalanan premotor. Okay. Next one, we have supplementary. Untuk motor cortex, 3. Primary motor, premotor, supplementary. So, premotor, SMA or supplementary motor area, it is located at medial surface of frontal lobe, adjacent to the portion of the primary motor cortex. Okay. Sini primary. Okay. Sini primary. Kalau kita tengok otak ni kan. Ni sulcus. This is primary. Ni. Kiri dan kanan. Because there are some action that being controlled by the same hemisphere. There are some action that being controlled by a different hemisphere. So this is the area of primary motor. And anterior to this primary motor, bahagian depan ni, is the area for premotor. And as for the supplementary motor, it said that the placement is medial. Okay, it is placed medial surface of frontal lobe adjacent to portion of the primary motor cortex. Okay, so we have primary motor cortex. Dia dekat bahagian medial. Bahagian medial ni bahagian dalam. Okay, tapi kalau kita tengok pada tepi, it will be somewhere around here lah. Okay, it will be somewhere around here, but dalam. Bukan kat luar. Luar is lateral. Okay, dekat bahagian dalam. Tu dia, 3 bahagian. Maksudnya sekarang, if we see this one, the structure of the brain, anything anterior to the sulcus responsible for voluntary motor movement. From the initiation up until the control. Up until the refine of the action. Tu dia, bahagian anterior of the sulcus dekat bahagian frontal lobe. Location, okay. Function, sequential movement, preparation and organization. Sikit lebih kurang dengan ini. Okay, cuma this one start with prepare, this one start with organize, and the major one is initiation. Okay, so daripada tiga ni, dia bergerak in term of plan, in term of dia punya, kita panggil sebagai generalized motor program. Dia akan bergerak, dia akan control, dia akan reshape, dia akan reorganize, dia akan ensure that it is in rhythm and controllable by three different cortex. Primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, and supplementary motor cortex. And this cortex located anterior to the central sulcus in the frontal region. Ini yang pertama. Okay. Sensory cortex yang pertama. Primary motor cortex. Okay. Okay, sampai situ okay. Kita baru cerita satu bahagian je ni. Parietal ada kerja dia, occipital ada kerja dia. Are you okay with this one?
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Right now, okay, sir.
Right now okay. Belum mabuk okay.
Belum. Kayai.
Lain macam bunyi bah. Okay.
Boleh.
So second one we go to saya tengok saya punya notes ni. Parietal. Okay, parietal loop. Function of parietal loop involved in the integration of movement, preparation and execution. Interact with the premotor cortex, primary motor cortex and SME. Ni dia function dia sikit lebih kurang sama, tapi dia bukan initiation. Initiation is primary. Dia integration of movement, meaning that from premotor, from supplementary motor, let's say we try to walk. So in order to walk, we need to move our left leg, right leg, and we are going to have some body gesture. We are going to have arm rotation, arm swing. So all of that is in their separate GMP. Okay, jadi si parietal loop ni is one of the cortex which integrate all of this GMP to become one. Dia akan integrate. Control coordination still lagi kerja supplementary dengan premotor. Macam tu so integration. Okay. Yang ni dulu. Dah sampai kat sini. Sekejap Okay, dia tak cerita dua loop yang lain. Alright. So how ni dah masuk subcortical. Tak apalah, saya jot down. Okay. So kita cerita 4 different loop. We have central sulcus, we have frontal, we have parietal, we have occipital, we have temporal. Okay, and then we have cerebellum, brainstem. This one frontal loop, this one temporal loop, this one parietal loop, this one occipital loop, this one central sulcus. Sini primary motor cortex, sini premotor cortex, and dekat bahagian medial here we have supplementary motor area. Okay, and then for parietal loop, okay, parietal loop moves is the function here, selain daripada integration of movement, this one is more towards perception and sensory information. Perception and sensory information. Okay. Primary somatic sensory, it will be located just posterior to the sulcus. Kita akan ada, mana nak tulisnya? Bawah. Primary somatic sensory. Okay, primary somatic sensory. Somatic ni apa dia? What can you define somatic? Apa yang kita boleh cerita tentang somatic? Somatic ni sebenarnya apa? Body. Okay. Relating
Body.
to the body. So this is the area where most of the sensory located. Dia punya end dia. Daripada afferent tu kan, dia punya end dia, kebanyakannya akan berada di sini. Because this is the primary sensory area. Dia duduk dekat anterior, posterior of the sulcus, dekat dalam parietal lobe. Okay. And then kita ada occipital lobe, which responsible more towards visual and visual perception. Okay, and as for temporal, kita akan ada memory, abstract and judgment. This one function dia lebih pada memory, abstract and judgment. That is the reason why kalau kena ketuk kat temporal ni, korang pun hilang, loss, short term memory loss. This is the reason. Because this is a place where most of the memory, abstract and judgment being made. So kalau orang minum, mabuk, this is the place where it hurt the most. So judgment out. Dekat bahagian temporal loop. Okay, ada soalan dekat sini. Lagi satu function dekat sini is for auditory. Okay, this is some of the function based on loop. Any question before we proceed?
No, sir.
Okay,
Okay, sir.
lagi satu, bila kita cerita tentang loop and function, mana saya punya page tadi? Okay, contohlah bila kita ada sekejap dia akan ada satu area yang selalu kita lupa. Kita tengok. Jom. Okay, macam ni kan, kita ambil satu je. We take this one, occipital loop, visual reception dengan visual interpretation. Same as primary motor, kita ada premotor, kita ada supplementary area. So other than that, they are not going to call as supplementary. Okay, contoh kan, kita ambil occipital, dia buat visual. If this is the area where the primary visual being being processed, there will be adjacent area. Maksudnya ini area primary visual. Di hadapan area primary visual, anterior towards the primary visual, there will always be one area known as association area. Kalau sini visual area, this one will be visual association. Okay, kalau tengok sini auditory, if this is auditory area, anterior to the auditory will be auditory association area. Macam ni speech kan, language. Speech area, so anterior to the speech area will be speech association area. Dia ada benda tu. Association ni dia jarang masuk dekat dalam ni. But that is the area that presents in order to associate. Meaning that association area ni, contoh kan kita ambil visual reception, depan ni visual association. It does not associate visual dengan visual, but this is the place where information from other cortex, information from other type of sensory being associated to the visual. Kita nampak kan dalam masa tu kita boleh tahu kita agak jauh. That is perception daripada sensory lain. So it occurs at the association area. Bila kita nak bercakap, so kita nak bercakap, orang tu jauh, so we need to raise up our voice. Macam mana kita jauh? Based on visual. So in order to increase the speech level, so speech association area will associate the information from visual with the speech, so that we can raise up our volume. Tu function association area. So all cortex have association area. Kalau cortex tu primary motor, and then dia akan ada supplementary dengan premotor. Kalau cortex tu visual, dia akan ada visual association area. Kalau tempat tu auditory, dia akan ada auditory association area to associate information from different cortex and at the same time from different sensory. Tu function of association area. Okay, sampai situ dulu. Alright, ada soalan?
Tak ada.
Enggak ada. Okey, kalau enggak ada, kita masuk kepada bahagian kedua otak, subcortical. Okay, subcortical come from the root word subcortical. Okay, sub and cortical. Sub is bawah. Cortical is cortex. Okay, so subcortical is this one. Ni, bahagian bawah ataupun bahagian bawah cortex, bahagian bawah cerebrum, bahagian dalam dia. So kalau kita angkat cerebrum, kita akan nampak subcortical parts. Okay, so subcortical parts ni, sekejap dia tak gambar tadi, yang gambar otak sebenar tadi tu dah tak ada dah. Okay, this is the subcortical part ni dalam ni. Okay, this is the brain stem. So subcortical parts, it is being placed underneath the cerebrum, superior towards the brainstem, kat atas. Okay, tu bahagian subcortical. Jadi apa kita ada dekat subcortical? We have basal ganglia. Okay, which one is basal ganglia? Let's see. Ni dia. Okay, dalam bahagian subcortical tu kita ada ni basal ganglia, benda yang berlipat ni. Okay, in between these two basal ganglia, satu per hemisphere. Okay, this one we have only one for those two hemisphere, is known as thalamus. Okay, bawah thalamus ni kita ada hypothalamus. Dia kat situ. Okay, kita ada basal ganglia, and then we have another one. Kita tak cerita terus. Tu dia, Diencephalon. So this basal ganglia, kita tengok bahagian-bahagian dia dulu. Ni. Dia ni. Ini kalau kita tengok sebelah. Tadi kan yang berlipat tu kan macam ekor siapa tayang kuku lawan ni. This is basal ganglia. So basal ganglia had several parts. Okay. Basal, boleh tak kita sekejap saya nak tunjuk gambar kalau boleh nampak kiri kanan. Jap. Okay, so ni kan satu basal ganglia for left hemisphere. So basal ganglia consists of several parts. Okay, the first one is known as caudate nucleus, where the nucleus of ganglia occurs to be. And then bahagian yang bulat ni besar ni, this is known as putamen. Ni yang besar ni. Okay, yang besar ni nama dia putamen. Ni nama dia caudate head ni caudate. Okay, nucleus, caudate nucleus. Okay, itu basal ganglia. Alright. So, for basal substantia nigra, dia punya kulit luar. Function of basal ganglia is to receive info from cortex from all four lobe and brain stem. Maksudnya sekarang, function of this part is actually an integration between cortex and brainstem. Cortex and brainstem. And it works towards movement initiation and then antagonist muscles during movement. Okay, soalan saya. If we see basal ganglia function, it is actually in contrast to the function of primary motor cortex. This is actually the one that control the subconscious movement, the involuntary movement. We contract our agonist, our agonist. At the same time, antagonist muscle will move, and this movement is not controlled by you, but it is automatically initiated by this part. Okay, jadi kan kalau kamu tengok betul-betul nanti, kejap lagi kamu cuba tangkap benda ni. Anything from here, midbrain ni, okay, midbrain sampailah kepada brainstem, works a lot towards your involuntary. Anything in your cerebrum works a lot with your voluntary. Itu dia punya kerja dia. Okay, itu kerja dia. Ini kerja yang pertama, basal ganglia. Okay, caudate nucleus, putamen, substantia nigra, and globus pallidus. Nama tu kalau tak ingat, kamu ingat je lah basal ganglia. Okay, common disease, if you have problem towards your basal ganglia, Parkinson, menggigil. Budak tu kena Parkinson, gigil. Okay, kenapa? Pasal dia kurang certain enzyme, and this enzyme works a lot towards maintaining the bukan maintaining control, but towards works a lot towards saya cakap dia bukan reshaping, but it is more macam kita the fine control of the movement. Jadi benda tu tak ada, dia tak boleh nak buat fine control. Meaning the control is still there, but jagged. Dia bergerak. So kalau basal ganglia out, you cannot produce enough dopamine. Okay, tu Parkinson ni kadang-kadang ditanyalah, kadang-kadang tidak. Okay, bahagian kedua, underneath basal ganglia, mana gambar yang itu dia. Okay, ni yang pertama, basal ganglia. Yang kedua, kita nak cerita ni kat tengah ni, diencephalon. Okay, the second part of midbrain is diencephalon. Ni, di tengah-tengah. Okay, jom tengok apa ada kat dalam ni. Diencephalon. Okay, so diencephalon yang paling famous, okay, the most famous part when we talk about diencephalon ni kan. Okay, contoh kita ambil gambar ni. Ni, diencephalon ni dekat tengah. This is basal ganglia. Okay, diencephalon placed in between two ganglia. So in the diencephalon, the two most important part is thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus is the major part of the of the diencephalon. Hypothalamus duduk bawah thalamus je. So satu bahagian ni, the end edge of the thalamus is hypothalamus. The major part of it is thalamus. Okay, and this part is the one that made midbrain ataupun bahagian tengah. Okay, subcortical parts. Ni dia, subcortical. Tu adalah bahagian dia, diencephalon. Two component of forebrain, contain two groups of nuclei. Thalamus receive and integrate sensory info from spinal cord and brainstem, and then hypothalamus, critical center for the control of endocrine system. Nampak, kita dah cerita dua lah sistem. Tadi dekat bahagian substantia nigra, dekat bahagian apa tu? Apa nama bahagian tadi? Dia banyak sangat nama ni. Cepat. Apa nama bahagian tadi? Basal ganglia. So it secreted dopamine. Dekat bahagian hypothalamus pun sama juga. It is a place where the endocrine system located, where most of the hormone being secreted here. And hypothalamus play a major role in maintaining body homeostasis. Panas jadi sejuk, sejuk jadi panas. Kenapa kita menggigil bila sejuk sangat? Kenapa bila lapar bunyi? Kenapa bila rasa nak lemas kita akan tarik nafas kuat-kuat? Contoh, kenapa kita, semua benda yang ada kaitan dengan endocrine, how our body control blood sugar, all of that happen in the hypothalamus. Okay, and again, like I said earlier, midbrain, okay, midbrain, subcortical level ni, midbrain especially, okay, subcortical semua yang kat bawah. Okay, subcortical semua ni subcortical. Midbrain is here. Okay. Diencephalon, Basal Ganglia. Later on kita akan tengok brain stem. All of this involve in involuntary. Contoh macam ni lah. Attention, mood. Mana kita boleh control nak gembira kan. Tiba-tiba tengok benda tu kita rasa gembira. We are not strike the feel of happy, but it just came because of certain action. Itu maksudnya involuntary lah. Ni function bahagian yang kedua, which is diencephalon. Okay, basal ganglia yang tadi, the first one, works more towards the integration between cortex and brainstem, okay, movement initiation, antagonist muscle, and as for the second one, the diencephalon, it works. It has two functions. The first one is relay for receiving and integrate sensory information, and the second one is to control homeostasis and endocrine system. Ni dua bahagian midbrain. Okay, dua bahagian midbrain dalam otak. Okay. Kamu jangan confuse, sekejap sebut midbrain, sekejap sebut apa tadi? Subcortical. Okay. Subcortical, bawah cortical. So anything beyond this is subcortical level. Okay, kalau cortical, ni cortex. Subcortical, midbrain pun subcortical, stem pun subcortical. Midbrain ada dua yang penting, substantia nigra dan basal ganglia, okay, putamen, caudate, substantia nigra, and then kita ada diencephalon, which consists of thalamus, hypothalamus and hippocampus. Tapi yang penting dua ni je, thalamus and hypothalamus. Okay, sampai situ dulu sebelum kita masuk cerebellum. Soalan?
Boleh, sir.
Boleh ingat ke? Mesti boleh kan, takkan tak boleh, come on. Kita cerita fakta, so kita tak payah nak putar belit benda tu kan. No, fakta is fakta, benda tu macam tu je. Just remember that. Dia ni bahagian yang kedua, okay, midbrain. So bahagian yang ketiga is cerebellum. Cerebellum ni, ni cerebellum belakang ni. Okay, for cerebellum, I need you to see, I need you to imagine, I need you to see this thing. Okay, cerebellum is the one that has sensory information from 3 different parts. Okay, dia ni bukan saja-saja terletak dekat situ. Dia tak bercantum dengan cerebrum, no. But the sensory neuron that move or that goes in and out from cerebellum came from 3 different parts. Satu, it come from cortex. 2, it come from brainstem. 3, it come from spinal cord. So dia attach pada tiga-tiga bahagian ni. Pada bahagian pertama pun dia attach. Okay, cerebrum ni consists of cerebrum and midbrain. Bahagian kedua pun dia attach, brainstem. Bahagian ketiga pun dia attach, which is spinal cord. So semua sensory masuk dan keluar ada di cerebellum. Cerebrum tak ada, dia terus. Okay, brainstem pun satu hala, but cerebellum, it consists of multiple channel. Itu yang pertama. Okay, so cerebrum, as cerebellum, it has cortex covering. Dia ada cortex covering. Kalau cerebrum tadi kita panggil dia cerebral cortex, yang ini kita panggil dia sebagai cerebellar cortex. B-E-L-L-E-R. Sekejap saya tengok nama sebenar ni. Cerebellum. Cerebellar cortex. Okay. Kalau cerebrum tadi, mabuk weh. Sekejap. Keluarkan gambar ni. Cerebellum cortex. Ni. Okay, nama dia ialah cerebellar cortex. So this is the shape of the cerebellar cortex. It still have gyrus and sulcus. Dia ada groove and ridges. Tapi groove and ridges dia more towards parallel shape. Ya, gambar yang clear sikit. Dia parallel. Dia bukan macam cerebrum cortex, berlipat-lipat. Cerebellar cortex is more parallel. Okay, and again, it consists of 2 hemisphere, kiri dan kanan. Lobe Tak banyak. Ada dua je. Anterior loop, posterior loop. Loop depan, loop belakang. Okay, that is cerebellum. Okay, cerebellum yang bagi kecil dekat belakang otak. Cerebrum yang besar. So it still have cortex covering known as cerebella, two hemisphere, left and right, and white matter under the cortex contain red nucleus where cerebellum motor neural pathway. Okay, motor neural pathway connect to the spinal cord. So most of the motor control also happen here. Let's see the function. Okay, dia punya function tu distinct, contrast, involved in control of smooth and accurate movement. Cerebrum involved in initiating the gross, benda yang besar, benda yang laju, benda yang kuat. But in order to get a smooth, in order to get control, cerebellum function. Okay, cerebellum function. That is the reason why it being connected to both cerebrum, to midbrain, and also to pons. Pons pula. Brainstem. One part of the brainstem is pons. Okay, dia contact dekat tiga-tiga because if you recall back what we have learned earlier, cerebrum, okay, especially the the motor cortex and the sensory cortex is the one that initiate and control the movement. Okay, initiating movement, preparing movement. And before it goes down, it goes to the cerebellum in order to include control, in order to make the movement smoother, in order to make the movement accurate. Barulah dia pergi kepada motor control. Kepada motor unit, kepada muscles. Itu jalan dia. Okay, so it involved in control of eye-hand coordination. Kenapa eye? Because occipital lobe is the place where visual being processed. Okay, and occipital lobe is actually adjacent to cerebrum, cerebellum. Jadi dia ada function dekat situ. Okay, it involves the association part where eye-hand coordination occurs. And this one serves as a type of movement error detection and correction. Cerebellum. Okay, dia adalah detector kepada pergerakan salah. Okay, receive copy of motor neural signal sent from motor cortex to muscles. So motor cortex hantar impulse kepada muscles through descending tract, and before it goes down, some information will be sent to cerebellum. So if there are problem, this is where impulse for smoothing or accuracy will be sent out. Jadi dia akan betulkan pergerakan tadi. Itu kerja cerebellum. Okay, cerebrum pergerakan asas. Cerebellum polish the pergerakan. Midbrain help in movement and also involuntary. Same goes for brainstem function, bahagian yang keempat. Ni brainstem. Okay, so beneath cerebrum. Tapi jangan pula kamu ingat dia terus attach dengan cerebrum. Pasal kita ada midbrain tadi. Okay, kita nampak dia macam ni kan. Dia beneath cerebrum. This is all cerebrum. This is cerebellum. This is brainstem. Okay, ni apa dia? Ini basal ganglia. Dekat dalam ni kita ada Diencephalon. Ini midbrain. Okay, bawah midbrain is the stem. It connect to the midbrain, it connects to the cerebellum. Jadi perjalanan dia daripada cerebrum dia akan lalu semua ni, baru dia masuk kepada brainstem. Okay, so 3 component involved in motor control. First, pons. Number 2, medulla. Number 3, reticular formation. Okay, kita ada pons and medulla. Ni yang agak penting compared to the third ones. Pons and medulla oblongata. Okay, this is part of midbrain. Okay, kita nak tengok yang ni. Part ni midbrain. Okay, ni midbrain. Ni apa benda ni? What is this? Apa benda
Basal
ni?
Ganglia.
Basal Ganglia.
Basal ganglia. Thalamus dengan hypothalamus. Okay, luar ni kita ada kamu ni. Ini bukan basal ganglia, this is diencephalon. This is diencephalon. Basal ganglia luar dia. Yang ada caudate tu, caudate dengan putamen tu. Ini yang ada thalamus dengan hypothalamus. Midbrain, okay, dalam brain. Bawah dia ni, ni semua kita panggil sebagai brainstem. Okay, all of this known as brainstem. Okay, so in brainstem, this is the two most important parts. First is pons. Number 2 is medulla oblongata. Okay, tengok ni bawah ni dah. Midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. So we have midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Ini kalau kita tengok dia secara tengok pada tepi. Okay, buat tu. Pons and medulla oblongata. Bawah ni. Ni spinal cord. Okay, we have pons. We have medulla oblongata. This is spinal cord. Ni midbrain. Ni basal ganglia. Okay. Dalam basal ganglia, datang ni. Ni basal ganglia kat luar. Sorry, basal ganglia dia dekat luar. Ni dalam ni. Okay, bukan dalam basal ganglia. Diencephalon and then we have basal ganglia. So kalau tengok pada tepi kita nampak macam ni je lah. We cannot see the diencephalon. Dia dekat tengah-tengah. Ni bahagian brainstem. Ni yang bahagian atas ni, this is called as midbrain, bahagian tengah otak. Okay, and then we have our cerebrum kat luar ni. Okay, so for dua bahagian ni, pons and medulla oblongata, first pons involved in control of various body function. Balance, chewing, pergerakan mimik muka. Okay, all of that is actually being controlled by pons. Chewing, swallowing, salivating, breathing, kerja pons. Semua benda tu not totally voluntary lah. Ada je yang kita tak voluntary. Contoh macam salivating kan. Kalau salivating ni voluntary, ada hari kita tak nak keluar air liur terus pun boleh. But it cannot happen like that. Okay, telan. Sampai je sini kamu telan, lepas tu dia jalan sendiri kan. Dia akan lalu peristalsis. So all of that is the function of pons. And the second one is medulla. Medulla is totally towards involuntary. Breathing, kita ada all those physiological process. Contoh macam tadi lah, peristalsis. And then kita ada pergerakan usus, peristalsis juga. Berpeluh, all of that being controlled by medulla. Ni yang saya cakap tadi, bila kita cerita midbrain, most of involuntary jadi kat sini. Bila kita cerita forebrain ataupun the cortex area, the cortical area, means all those voluntary movement happen to be there. Okay, and finally is reticular formation. Reticular ni dia kurang famous. Dia just an integration between sensory and motor info. Info bukan impulse. Information, reticular formation. Okay, itu adalah 4 bahagian otak. I repeat again. Cerebrum, cerebellum, midbrain, and stem. So cerebrum we can divide into 4: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. Okay, and then we have gyrus and sulcus. Same goes as cerebellum, where we have anterior and posterior part. Both of this component consist of left and right hemisphere. Okay, and then we have midbrain or subcortical level, bawah cortical, bawah cortex. We have midbrain consists of basal ganglia, diencephalon at the top of the midbrain, and underneath that we have pons, medulla oblongata, and reticula as part of the brainstem, and then only you have spinal cord. Itu adalah 4 bahagian utama otak. Okay, sampai situ. Question. Spinal cordis. Alright. Okay. Untuk spinal cord, kita akan tengok structure. Grey matter, white matter. Okay, we have grey matter H shape ataupun kita boleh panggil dia sebagai butterfly shape. Jadi kita tengok. And then two pair of horns, we have dorsal and ventral. Interneuron, Renshaw, Okay. Kita tengok spinal cord tu. This lock. Ni dia. Okay, for spinal cord, kalau kita ambil bentuk asal dia, let's take, mana best lah? Ni best. Okay. Spinal cord pathway. Alright, this is your spinal cord. Ni ni spinal cord. Yang ni grey matter. Ini tak nampak. Sekejap, saya lain. Sama tak? Tak nampak. Okay. So let's use this one. Ni spinal cord. Okay, the first one, this is your spinal cord. Okay, so in your spinal cord, we are going to have two type of substance, matter. The first one is known as grey matter, pasal warna dia kelabu. Second one, the cord itself is known as white matter. Okay, tulang belakang kat depan ni. Ni tulang belakang kat sini. So this will be your spine here. Ada yang gambar spine. Okay, tu yang pertama. Matter, we have H ataupun grey matter ataupun kita panggil dia sebagai butterfly shape. Okay, this is the grey matter and surrounding that grey matter is the white matter. Okay, the most important part for the spinal cord is actually the H. Okay, ni H. Sini tulang. And we are going to divide this H into two. Bagi dua. This is the anterior part towards the vertebra, and the another part is going to be the posterior part. Okay, anterior part, posterior part. So for the anterior part, the name is ventral horn. Ni, bahagian ni. Tak best lah, ni kita conteng. Okay, katalah kita buat saraf tunjang tu macam ni, and here is going to be your vertebra. So this saraf tunjang, we name it as white matter. And inside this white matter, we have some sort of butterfly shape known as grey matter. Okay, so this part is the posterior part, and this part is the anterior. So for anterior part, kita bagi dua ni. Anterior part, this is known as ventral horn. And for the posterior part, this is known as dorsal horn. Okay, ventral part, posterior part. Ventral part, anterior part, posterior part. So we have dorsal horn, we have ventral horn. Okay, for dorsal horn, for the posterior part, this is more towards sensory neuron. Macam ni cakap macam ni. Sensory neuron. So, partner dia, ventral horn, is for motor neuron. Okay, sensory neuron move from sensor to CNS. Ingat ya, sensory neuron is from your sensor to the CNS. So this is known as ascending tract, meaning that the movement of the impulse is from bottom up to the brain. Kawan dia, the ventral horn, the motor neuron, since nama pun motor, meaning this one is from the CNS to the motor or muscles. So nama lain dia yang ini ialah descending tract. Ni struktur asal struktur asal untuk saraf tunjang. Okay, so from ventral horn there will be some supplementary roots. Dia akan ada keluar macam ni, sini akan ada keluar. This is known as dorsal root. So kalau dorsal root ada, ventral root pun ada, which come out from ventral horn. So, kita akan ada satu gitu. Ni ventral root. Okay, apa benda ni? Just like what we have learned, we have sometimes we have collateral. Okay, dekat neuron kan kita ada collateral. Sometimes we have multipolar. So benda-benda ni lah yang akan membuat dorsal root dengan ventral root, which originate from either dorsal ataupun ventral. If this root originate from the spinal cord, spinal cord pun akan keluarkan root macam ni. This is known as spinal nerve. Ni adalah anatomy asal untuk spinal cord. Okay, kita tengok ada tak gambar ni. Contoh macam ni. Okay, ni dorsal horn kan. This is dorsal horn. Ni yang keluar ni. This is ventral horn. Ni yang keluar ni, this is ventral root. So it goes towards musculature. Same goes as the sensory part. So kalau sensory part, dia masuk daripada muscles tu, masuk ke bahagian dorsal. This is known as dorsal root. If this elongated structure came from the white matter, it is known as nerve root. Ni adalah gambar asal untuk spinal cord. Okay, white matter, grey matter, we have ventral horn at the anterior part. We have dorsal horn at the posterior. So dorsal horn function as the ascending tract, sending information from the sensor to the CNS, and the ventral horn function as the descending tract, where information from the CNS being channeled to the musculature. Ni spinal cord. So dia macam highway lah, highway for impulse. Okay, that's first one. Okay, this is sensory neural pathway. Sensory is afferent, so ascending. Okay, sensory is afferent, jadi dia adalah ascending through dorsal horn. Okay, itu dia. Okay, dorsal column. And then number 2 we have motor. Motor is efferent ataupun descending tract through ventral horn. Itu dia. Okay, and towards the end, ni datang towards the end, okay, from the ventral root to the efferent, we have motor unit. Inilah dia. Okay, alpha motor neuron and all the skeletal muscle fiber innervate. When a motor neuron activate, all fire, the ultimate end of the motor neural information. Okay, motor unit ni, it get impulse and it activated contraction, and the contraction occurs based on the size of I think the size of motor neuron size. Okay, size of the motor neuron itself. So there are certain neuron smaller compared to other. Okay, motor neuron kan ada banyak kan. So the end of motor neuron, you are going to get motor unit. So each of motor neuron, they are threshold of impulse, and it will be activated start from the most weak, the most smallest size of neuron towards the biggest one. Jadi dia punya activation, but it is going to be activated 100% or no. Maksudnya, okay, kita nak activate 10 neuron, dia akan activate daripada neuron paling tak power sampai neuron paling power 10. And 10 will be activated. Nombor 11, there are no half activation. That is how our our impulse work. So it activate the motor unit once or it does not activated. If we try to have more force, if we try to have more muscle contraction, meaning that more motor unit will be activated. How to do so? Our CNS will send more impulse towards the respective motor unit, so that much more can be activated. Itu motor unit kita. Okay, contoh macam tu ni contoh-contoh dia. Alright, amount of force generated by muscles depend on number of muscle fiber activated. Muscle fiber activated based on number of motor unit. More motor unit, more fiber being activated. Okay, ni size principle. It works based on motor neuron cell body. Okay, it works based on this one. Okay, ni size ni dia activate based on this size. Okay, because motor neuron itself it has a lot of size. Itulah kita ambil ni kan ni cell body ni. So there are large cell body, there are smaller cell body. So based on the concept of size, the smallest cell body will be activated first because it use less amount of impulse to be excited. Okay, bila impulse ni masuk kan, contoh macam current lah, this neuron activated with 10 MHz contoh. So if the CNS fit 100 MHz, so all neuron which in the threshold daripada 10 sampai lah 100 will be activated. If the threshold is more than the impulse being sent, it won't be excited, it won't be activated. When that happen, there are no motor contraction occurs. Dia macam tu. Okay, dia macam lagi sekali macam ni. Okay, katalah let's say we have this kind. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this one excite by 10 MHz. This one excite by 12 MHz. This one excite by 50 MHz. This one excite by 100. And finally, this one excite by 250. Okay, let's say we try to have a contraction up until here, 50. Means the impulse come will be something like that. Ataupun mungkin something like that. Means anything underneath this threshold will be excited. 100 dengan 200 tak. Okay, if we try to have the most outcome from the contraction, so more impulse will be sent, so that all motor neuron will be activated, will be excite. Dia dapat elektrik yang cukup, dia akan excite. So bila dia dah cukup, yang lebih dia akan pergi kat sebelah until the required number of motor neuron being excited. And when that happen, it will activate the motor unit and contraction will occur. Tu perjalanan descending track ataupun perjalanan motor unit recruitment. Okay, and finally kita tengok ni. This one is just an experiment, so you may read about it later. Okay, sekejap, dia tak tunjuk yang itu. I need you to have this diagram. This is actually the diagram depicting conceptual hierarchy organization. Conceptual hierarchy organization of neural. Okay, I need you to have this one. Please have this. Boleh tak kita kita nak page tadi baik kan? We just want this page. Okay, so here we have highest level, and then sensory cortex, basal ganglia, thalamus, brainstem, cerebellum, local level, or this one is going to be spinal cord. Okay, kat bawah ni spinal cord, and then the receptor. So this one is actually how our motor program being proposed based on the receptor. Okay, it show you the movement of impulse from the receptor to the muscles fiber back. Jadi kita boleh nampak pada receptor, it goes to the spinal cord. Okay, meaning it goes upwards. This one is ascending track through dorsal horn. And from the spinal cord, it goes to the brainstem. It goes to the medulla oblongata. It goes to the pons. Okay, and from that, it goes to the midbrain, basal ganglia, and thalamus, and finally towards the sensory cortex, where it being compute, and then the GMP will be drop down. The required GMP will be load lah dekat sini. Receptor kata nak lari, so GMP about lari akan dikeluarkan, and from that GMP it will be sent to the sensory cortex again. Okay, it will be sent towards the sensory cortex again, where the movement will be load, it will be controlled before it being integrated dekat midbrain. Okay, so after it being integrated dekat midbrain, it will be sent into brainstem, where additional control will be conducted by middle level cerebellum. Okay, katalah pergerakan tadi mungkin bukan yang terbaik, so adjustment will be made here before brainstem delivered the information back towards the spinal cord via ventral horn, via descending tracks towards muscle fiber. Daripada mana? Daripada ventral root. So ini adalah perjalanan impulse from receptor up until action. Okay, right.